For 7 years, I had been married to Ethan, and for most of those years, I had been blissfully happy. Our relationship was built on trust, love, and understanding. We had faced challenges together, but nothing we couldn't overcome. Yet, there was one person who threatened to unravel everything we had built: Ethan's sister, Chloe. It wasn't always this way. In the beginning, when Ethan and I first started dating, I genuinely liked Chloe. She was Ethan's sister, after all, and I thought I should make an effort to get along with her. Besides, Ethan spoke highly of her, and I assumed that she would be a key part of our life together. But from the very start, I noticed a few things that made me uneasy. Chloe had a way of inserting herself into every conversation, making herself the center of attention, and subtly throwing digs at me. It wasn't overtly malicious at first, just little comments here and there about my appearance, my tastes, and my lifestyle. But they weren't exactly compliments either. I brushed it off, thinking I was just being overly sensitive. The deeper I got into my relationship with Ethan, the more I realized that Chloe's behavior wasn't just annoying, it was toxic. She was manipulative, controlling, and constantly in competition with me. Every time I thought we were making progress in our relationship, there Chloe was, inserting herself into our private moments and trying to create tension. Ethan and I started dating when we were both in our early 20s. I had always admired him from afar. He was kind, intelligent, and considerate, everything I'd ever wanted in a partner. The first time I met Chloe, she was warm and welcoming. I thought, this is great. She's going to be a good sister-in-law. But it didn't take long before I realized that Chloe was not like most sisters. At first, I chalked up her behavior to sibling rivalry. She had always been very protective of Ethan, and maybe she was just wary of me entering the picture. After all, I was the woman who was going to take her brother away from her. But over time, I began to realize that there was more to it. Chloe's behavior wasn't just about her being protective, it was about control. As our relationship deepened, Ethan began to talk about moving in together. We had been dating for a little over a year, and we were excited about taking the next step. However, when I mentioned it to Chloe, her reaction was not what I expected. Instead of being happy for us, she immediately made me feel like an outsider in her brother's life. You know, Ethan's not always the easiest to live with, she warned me. He's very particular about things, and he gets frustrated easily. Her tone wasn't caring, it was patronizing, as if I were too naive to understand what I was getting into. At first, I let it slide. After all, she was just looking out for her brother, right? But then she started making more subtle jabs. She would say things like, I don't know if you're really his type. Maybe you should have more in common with him. She would bring up his exes constantly, comparing me to them, how they were better at cooking, how they shared more of his interests. It was like she was trying to plant seeds of doubt in my mind, and for a while it worked. Ethan noticed the tension between Chloe and me, but he didn't fully understand the extent of her interference. He thought I was overreacting, that it was just Chloe being Chloe. But it wasn't just her quirkiness or her overprotectiveness. It was the way she deliberately tried to sabotage our relationship. Chloe wanted to control who Ethan spent time with, who he dated, and even where he lived. She didn't want him to be happy unless she was happy, and that was something I could never accept. Chloe's interference reached its peak one summer when Ethan and I were getting ready to move in together. We had been dating for 2 years at this point, and everything seemed perfect. But when I mentioned the idea of living together, Chloe wasted no time in stepping in to help. You're making a huge mistake, she said to Ethan one day. I know you think this is what you want, but I know you better than anyone. You're not really ready for this. Do you even know what it's like to live with her? What if she's hiding things from you? Ethan tried to brush it off, but Chloe was relentless. She continued to plant doubt in his mind, making him question my intentions. It worked. For a brief moment, Ethan and I had a huge argument. He was convinced by Chloe's manipulations that I wasn't the right person for him. The emotional toll this took on me was immense. How could Ethan not see that his sister was poisoning his thoughts? How could he believe her over me? It was as if I was fighting a battle I couldn't win. Chloe's voice was louder than mine, and Ethan, for the first time in our relationship, seemed to doubt me. We almost broke up. Ethan and I spent weeks apart, each of us trying to process the whirlwind of emotions that had been stirred up. Chloe was behind the scenes, playing the role of the concerned sister, while I was left to pick up the pieces of my shattered heart. But Ethan finally came to his senses. After a lot of soul-searching, he realized that Chloe had no right to control his life, and that he needed to trust his own instincts. We patched things up, but the damage had already been done. I could never fully trust Chloe again, and from that point on, I kept my distance. The day Ethan proposed was one of the happiest moments of my life. I was finally going to marry the love of my life, the man who had stood by me through everything. I had never been more excited, but just as quickly as the excitement bubbled up, Chloe's presence cast a shadow over it all. From the moment we got engaged, Chloe started playing her games again. She didn't congratulate us or offer any kind words. Instead, she made it clear that she wasn't happy with our decision. "I'm surprised Ethan even proposed to you," she said one day, after I had shared the news with her. "He never did that with any of his exes. Are you sure this is what you want?" Ethan tried to dismiss her comments, but they stung. I had hoped that with our engagement, things would get better between us, but Chloe only seemed to get worse. The jealousy she harbored was palpable, and every time she spoke to me, it felt like a challenge. It was like she was trying to prove that I wasn't worthy of Ethan, that I didn't belong in their family. The wedding itself was a nightmare. Chloe showed up dressed in black, a bold statement that she was in mourning, not celebrating. She made sure to criticize every detail of the ceremony. My dress, the flowers, the music, it was all wrong in her eyes, and she didn't hesitate to voice her opinions loudly and unapologetically. During the reception, it all boiled over. Chloe stormed up to me and in front of everyone accused me of taking her brother away and ruining their family. She demanded that Ethan choose between her and me, as if we were competing for his affection. It was humiliating. I had never felt so small, so disrespected in my entire life. Ethan, to his credit, stood up for me. He told Chloe that she needed to respect his decisions and stop meddling in his life. It was the first time he had ever stood up to her like that, and it was long overdue. But the damage was done. That night, Chloe caused enough drama to almost ruin our special day. My in-laws had to step in and ask her to leave the reception early. That was the turning point for me. From that moment on, I knew I couldn't let Chloe continue to poison my life. I had to protect my relationship with Ethan, and that meant setting firm boundaries with her. After our wedding, I tried to distance myself from Chloe. I refused to engage in any of her drama, but she wasn't one to give up easily. She would send passive-aggressive texts, trying to provoke me into a confrontation. She even tried to insert herself into our honeymoon plans, suggesting that Ethan and I should invite her along. It was always about her. A few months later, I found out I was pregnant. It was a joyous occasion, and Ethan and I were over the moon. But Chloe's reaction was far from supportive. When we shared the news at Ethan's birthday party, she froze. The room went silent as her eyes narrowed with something I couldn't quite place: jealousy, anger, and something darker. She made no effort to congratulate us. Instead, she threw herself into a corner of the room, seething in silence. But what happened next shocked me beyond belief. At the party, Chloe handed me a plate of food. It was supposed to be a special dish she had made just for me. She was always trying to one-up everyone with her cooking, trying to prove she could do things better than anyone else. But this time, there was something off about the way she handed me the plate. There was no smile, no warmth, just an icy look in her eyes. Feeling somewhat uneasy, I hesitated but took a small bite. It tasted delicious at first, but then I felt a sharp pain in my stomach. My vision blurred and I stumbled back, the plate clattering to the ground. Gasps filled the room, and before I knew it, I was collapsing onto the floor. Chaos erupted. Ethan rushed to my side, his face pale with fear. He called for an ambulance as Chloe stood in the background, a smug look on her face. It was as if she had been waiting for this moment, relishing the chaos she had created. When the paramedics arrived, they immediately began to assess the situation. I could hear them talking about possible food poisoning. My heart raced as I was wheeled out on a stretcher. I could feel Ethan's grip tightening around my hand, his fear palpable. He was terrified of losing me and our unborn child. As I lay in the hospital, doctors worked quickly to determine what had caused my sudden illness. They ran tests and monitored my vital signs. Ethan remained by my side, his worry etched across his face. I felt guilty for putting him through this, but the pain in my stomach was blinding. After a few hours, the doctor returned with alarming news. "It appears you ingested something toxic," he said, looking grave. "We need to run more tests to identify the substance, but you and your baby are stable for now." A wave of dread washed over me. Who would do something like this? How could someone be so malicious? It wasn't until later, when Jamie, Chloe's husband, was admitted to the hospital after also eating the dish, that the truth began to unfold. He was gravely ill, and the hospital staff began to suspect foul play. Under pressure, Jamie revealed that Chloe had tampered with the food, and suddenly everything made sense. When the police arrived to question her, Chloe's facade began to crack. In a fit of desperation, she confessed. "I just wanted to ruin her life," she admitted, tears streaming down her face. "I was jealous. I couldn't stand to see Ethan happy with her." My heart sank. The realization that someone I had once considered family could harbor such malice was devastating. I had spent years trying to be accommodating, trying to make peace, but all along, she had been plotting against me. Chloe was arrested on multiple charges: attempted poisoning, endangerment of an unborn child, and conspiracy to harm. The shock waves rippled through our families, and for the first time, people began to see her for who she truly was. As the weeks passed, I struggled to cope with the aftermath of the ordeal. The trauma weighed heavily on my heart. I had been so careful, so focused on protecting my pregnancy, and yet Chloe had still found a way to invade our lives. Ethan was furious with his sister. He struggled to reconcile the woman he had grown up with and the monster she had become. Our families were torn apart. While my parents were supportive, Chloe's parents were in denial. They couldn't believe their daughter was capable of such a heinous act. Jamie recovered slowly, and he was left to deal with the fallout of Chloe's actions. He hadn't seen it coming. He had always viewed her as the devoted wife. Now, he was grappling with the reality that he had stood by a woman who was willing to harm others to get what she wanted. Chloe's arrest sparked conversations about mental health, jealousy, and family dynamics within our circles. People began to question how they could have overlooked her behavior for so long. There was a collective sense of shame. How could we have allowed such toxicity into our lives? As for me, I began therapy to deal with the trauma of the situation. I needed to understand how to process the feelings of betrayal and fear that haunted me. It wasn't easy. Some days were better than others, and the thought of Chloe still loomed large in my mind. Ethan and I worked hard to create a safe environment for our growing family. We installed security systems and took extra precautions to protect ourselves. The police advised us to stay vigilant, as Chloe still had her supporters who might try to stir trouble. Eventually, we welcomed our baby into the world, a beautiful son we named Nate. The joy of his arrival was a beacon of light amidst the darkness that had engulfed our lives. Holding him for the first time, I felt a wave of love wash over me. This was the family I had always wanted, and I would do anything to protect it. As we settled into our new life as parents, I tried to put Chloe's actions behind me. I wanted to focus on my family, on the love and happiness we had built together. But the scars from the past lingered. The fear of betrayal never fully left me, and I often found myself looking over my shoulder, expecting the worst. Despite everything, I found solace in my friendships. My closest friends rallied around me, offering support and love. They had seen what I had gone through, and they understood the need to create boundaries. Together, we forged a new path forward, one built on trust and honesty. As time passed, I began to realize that while I couldn't change the past, I could influence the future. I started volunteering at local organizations that supported mental health awareness and family dynamics. I wanted to use my experience to help others who might be facing similar challenges. In sharing my story, I found healing. It became my mission to raise awareness about toxic relationships and the importance of setting boundaries. I spoke at community events, sharing the lessons I had learned and the importance of recognizing unhealthy patterns before they spiral out of control. A year after Nate was born, Chloe was released from jail after serving a reduced sentence for her crimes. The family was divided. Some were willing to forgive her, while others were horrified by her actions. Ethan struggled with the idea of forgiving his sister, torn between familial loyalty and the safety of his family. When Chloe reached out to us, I was initially terrified. She had spent so long trying to sabotage my life, and now she wanted to reconnect. I couldn't shake the fear that she hadn't truly changed. My instincts told me to keep my distance, but Ethan wanted to believe she had learned from her mistakes. In a moment of weakness, we agreed to meet her for coffee, hoping for closure. But the moment I saw her, my heart sank. Chloe had a new polished image, but her eyes held the same darkness I had seen before. She spoke about her time in jail as if it were a vacation, a time to reflect and grow. But the more she talked, the more I could see the manipulative streak still lurking beneath the surface. "You know, I never meant to hurt you," she said, a disingenuous smile plastered on her face. "I was just jealous of what you had. But I've changed. I want to be part of your lives again." I could feel my stomach twist in knots. This was the same woman who had tried to poison me, who had come so close to ruining my life. I couldn't let my guard down. I looked over at Ethan, who was nodding along, clearly torn. When I finally spoke, my voice was steady but firm. "Chloe, I don't trust you. You may say you've changed, but your actions speak louder than your words. You hurt me, and you hurt our family. I can't forgive that so easily." Her expression darkened. "You don't have to be so dramatic. I'm just trying to move on, and you should too." At that moment, I realized that Chloe hadn't changed. She was still the same toxic person she had always been, and I had no intention of allowing her back into my life or my family's. Ethan and I left the coffee shop that day, and he finally understood. He saw the hurt in my eyes and recognized that some wounds are too deep to heal. Chloe was not welcome in our lives anymore. In the years that followed, I focused on my family, my career, and my passion for raising awareness about toxic relationships. I published articles, spoke at conferences, and even started a blog to share my journey. It became a way to channel my pain into something positive, to help others find their strength. Nate grew up in a loving environment, free from the chaos that had once threatened to consume us. Ethan and I made a pact to always prioritize our relationship and our family. We had learned the hard way that trust is fragile and must be nurtured. Chloe became a distant memory, a lesson learned rather than a lingering threat. Our lives moved on, filled with laughter, love, and the occasional bumps in the road that life inevitably brings. We had survived a storm, and in the process, we had emerged stronger than ever. While I couldn't erase the past, I found peace in knowing that I had taken control of my narrative. Chloe's jealousy and manipulation no longer had power over me. I had forged a new path, one filled with love, hope, and resilience. And as I looked at my family, I knew that we were ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Together,